Hello and welcome to a very special Memorial Day episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal, and if you're thinking that this shirt makes me look like a hippopotamus on camera, I'm right there with you. Reminding you, as always, if you like watching hippopotamuses on camera, then you should click the subscribe button and then the bell right next to it so that you'll always be informed of a new episode posting to YouTube. You don't want to miss another episode of WJ Live, where you'll always get the truth about the news of the day from the largest and most influential publisher of Christian conservative news and commentary, the Western Journal. On today's show, we have assignment editor Joey Chester on my right, who does not look like a hippopotamus.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's the nicest thing I've ever said about Joey Chester.
That's really kind.
He'll tell us whether the Biden administration is likely to favor American jobs and energy policy or the radical left-wing environmentalists in the Democratic Party. You can probably guess which. Then reporter Brett Kershaw on my left, also only slightly resembling a hippopotamus.
I'll take it.
Has some musings about America's involvement in foreign wars on this Memorial Day. A lot better hair than your average hippopotamus, though.
Oh, excellent. It's tremendous. Yeah. Great job.
But first, Democrats last night in the Texas state legislature staged a walkout to delay a vote on a bill that they call voter suppression, because of course they do. What don't they call voter suppression? Although the Texas State Senate had approved the bill Saturday, the House was deliberating Sunday as the legislative clock ran down. The legislative session ended at midnight last night. State Representative Chris Turner, the House Democratic Caucus chairman, texted fellow Democrats at 10:35 p.m., telling them, quote, "Take your key and leave the chamber discreetly," the key being what they use to lock in the vote. Do not go to the gallery, leave the building. So I'm not sure I know all of the implications of those instructions, but that sounds like sneaking out to me. That doesn't sound like, a dramatic walkout. That sounds more like sneakiness. Anyway, they walked out at 10:45. The House did not have the 100 members necessary for a quorum and therefore had to adjourn, and the session was over. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has called for the legislature to meet again, actually has called pretty stringently, threatening to cut off pay, in special session to consider this bill, which he considers an emergency measure. So it looks like the Democrats did little but waste everyone's time, garner a few headlines. So in other words, Monday. So what is this voter suppression the Democrats are so concerned about? Well, it's heinous. Let me just tell you, this bill does a few different things. It includes criminal penalties, for instance, for mailing a ballot to somebody who has not specifically requested one. Heaven forbid that we penalize the willy-nilly mailing of empty ballots. It also does away with 24-hour voting. So, for those Texans who like to vote at 3 a.m, they would be out of luck. I can just imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to run polling places 24 hours.
How do you staff that?
I don't know. I don't know. And it also eliminates curbside voting, which I understand there may be a few handicapped individuals or people with physical disabilities or injuries or whatnot for whom that might be something of a problem. But by law in Texas, all polling places have to be accessible to pretty much everybody. So that has already been made provision for. So that's what voter suppression looks like in Texas right now. There is no pleasing Democrats on this issue, obviously. Democrats are upset that in Texas you have to register to vote 30 days prior to Election Day. That's hugely problematic. They don't like voter ID, of course, in Texas, but there are 7 forms of ID in Texas that you can use to prove your identity, photo ID. And if you can't get one, there's another form you can fill out to show why you can't get one. And then you can use like a utility bill that has your name and address on it. You can actually get a voter registration card that says you don't have to show voter ID on it. Just by going through this process. Nobody is being denied the right to vote here. No one. Granted that Texas is considered by many the most difficult state in which to vote. I think that's the wrong way to phrase that. I think that's like being called the shortest player on the Lakers. I mean, whoever, I don't know the shortest player on the Lakers, but I guarantee he's got 5 inches on me. So it's a silly way to phrase it. But yeah, so Texas is considered by many the most difficult state in which to vote. But here's my question, guys. How easy should voting actually be, Joey?
I'm really happy you asked the question this way. I don't think that voting should be the easiest thing to do in the world. There's a great responsibility that comes with voting. And so I think having these requirements shows that you're willing to take on that responsibility. You're willing to bear that, to cast your vote. You're showing that it means something. I especially think like the residency requirements, if that means you can't show up in Texas, move to Texas 5 days before the election, register to vote and vote. You have to be there, as I say, have some skin in the game to be able to vote. And I think that's important. I think there's way too many people in the United States who vote and they don't know anything that they're voting about, and they're not in it. They don't know what's going on, and they probably shouldn't be voting because they haven't done their due diligence. And so, obviously everyone should be guaranteed the right to vote. That's important in America. But there also has to be some civic duty, some self-responsibility that you have to take to exercise that right. I'm trying to think another thing, like getting a driver's license. You can't just go get a driver's license without first going through that process.
You're entitled to drive.
Yeah, if you've ever gone hunting, there's a process you have to go through before you can get a hunting license. There are responsibilities.
You have to show ID to get on an airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
To go on vacation.
Yeah. So this idea that you should just be able to vote, there should be no sort of residency requirements, no restrictions, vote 24 hours a day, vote 2 months in advance. It's just, that's just crazy to me. So voting should be easy when you've met all the requirements to vote.
There you go.
And I don't think those requirements are crazy at all.
Brett, you agree with that?
I agree with just about everything that Joey just said. The procedural restrictions are really important. Like ensuring that somebody just can't move to a town and then vote right away. Obviously, of course,
they need time just to learn the issues.
Exactly.
All of these things are very common sense. And to me, I just there's one thing: make voting day a holiday. I don't understand how
I like that idea.
How crazy that is. I feel like there's a lot of bipartisan support. And when I think of voting, I do happen to think of those struggling working families that can't get out between 5 and 9 or 7 and 7 and get out and vote. So a 24/7 facility doesn't make sense. Who's going to staff that? I've done election work, and I couldn't tell you one person that wants to sign up and work at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday.
People don't want to do that when they're paid for it.
Yes.
Exactly. And if you talk to poll workers, you'll quickly find out that the way the system is right now, they're pretty content. They're it works. They don't want changes created to expand their role. Being a volunteer poll worker, I don't want to stay at 24 hours for one facility. They understand that there's some sort of worth in having specific hours or specific restrictions in place. All of these are very common sense. And if I could wrap this back around, what are these Democrats doing? What's their skin in the game? This is obviously theater. And what do these constituents think about what's going on? Because we're having a great conversation here about what could be done to make voting better. And people are sending texts this is, to me, this is just children.
Yeah.
These are just there's people that need to vote. People's lives are at stake. Their bills are here, and this is.
That's the key question. Are Democrats really involved in or interested in making voting easy? Is that really their issue, or are they being principled, or are they just being cynical? What do you think they're doing?
Completely cynical in my mind. If they wanted to see when we say make voting easier, I think we would all say that like we want people to vote. We don't want restrictions to be
Right.
Like you want, it's a democracy. We want people to get out and be proud and be
Right.
responsible. But when we ask questions or specific questions are asked, like, well, what do you think about democracy, Mr. or Mrs. State Senator? Like, do you think democracy works better on the federal level or the state level? And they just don't have an answer for that. That's in my mind. I'm like, oh, well, these people are being cynical. They're not asking questions. They're not thinking about things which
Sure.
could pursue more inquiry and actually understand, like, this is the way democracy should work in this country. It's just theater to them.
Yeah.
Maybe there's one or two that are really passionate about these things, but it's just milquetoast political theater. And, yeah.
Democrats and Republicans, actually increasingly Republicans in recent years, have really excelled in sort of get out the vote drives and voter registration drives, that kind of thing. It certainly seems to me that every state could easily require photo ID for voting, and then that becomes the drive. Just you want people to vote, go help them get a photo ID. If you are really convinced that people are so stupid or lazy or drunk all the time, or whatever it is you think they are, that they can't manage to get a photo ID, go help them do it. Do that. Make that part of the voter registration drive. But I think people value what they pay for, whether they pay for it money or time or effort or whatever. And so kind of to your point earlier, Joey, I want people to value their vote.
Exactly.
I want it to matter to them. And so putting a little bit, now you can take that too far for sure, but I want there to be a little bit of effort thrown in there. But what do you think the Democrats are doing, Joey? Is this just theater?
Something that we talk a lot about around here is ideological possession, where Democrats have become so possessed in their ideology that they have blinders on like this. They have tunnel vision, and they can't look outside that tunnel. The right, and I think Trump plays a part in this. I'm not saying this is a negative thing, but Trump has pushed really hard for election integrity post-2020, and I'm not saying anything crazy happened in 2020. There are a lot of rule changes that were terrible in 2020, and that's what most of
them on the fly.
Yeah, on the fly, and that's what a
Yeah.
lot of these states are trying to reverse now
Yeah.
and prevent from happening again, is these COVID rule changes that happen just out of the blue and quickly without any sort of oversight. They're trying to make sure that doesn't
authority to do it.
Right. They're trying to make sure that never happens again.
Right.
But that should be something that's bipartisan. And it's funny because Democrats always say that the right is the ones attacking the republic and the voting process and democracy, when they are the ones that are fine with instant rule changes without any oversight, without any authority. They're fine with elections being changed like that. But they're so possessed by their ideology, and that's all due to Trump, I think, and the right's message of voter integrity post-2020, that they refuse to have anything bipartisan to do with election integrity. They have blinders on, and anything that is a voting bill is restrictive, and it's terrible, and it's anti-democracy.
To your point, Joe Biden referred to the Texas bill in consideration here as an assault on democracy. I'm surprised he even found the time to comment, because he's been so involved in his own assault on the American energy industry.
Yes. It seems like that is Joe Biden's favorite pastime.
Isn't that day one, Keystone, day one.
I'm kind of bored right now. I think I'll go after another pipeline or something. So before we get into it, I want to show you a picture on the screen here. If Logan could pull that up. Do you recognize what that is?
That's a bird.
Do you know what type?
100% correct. That's a bird.
Have you seen one of those before?
I'm think I'm glad.
Brett, how about you? Do you know what that is?
I cheated this morning.
You cheated. Well, folks, that is the lesser prairie chicken.
It looked lesser to me.
Yes, it's not the greater prairie
chicken. It definitely
chicken.
Looks lesser.
We did find out that the
big
greater
lesser vibe.
The lesser is much more aesthetically pleasing.
It would almost have to be.
So that bird right there could cost American energy workers their jobs, thanks to Mr. Joe Biden. Now, if you guys remember, on day one of the Biden presidency, he canceled the Keystone XL
Absolutely.
pipeline, putting over 10,000 American jobs in danger, harming relations with Canada. And then just a couple weeks ago, we talked about on the podcast about Biden lifting sanctions or not imposing sanctions on a Russian pipeline and allowing that to go into Europe. Well, on Friday, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, headed up, it's part of the executive branch, backed by Joe Biden and John Kerry, moved to place that chicken. I think it's a breed. It's in the pheasant family, so I can't.
Yes,
but they call it a
course.
chicken. Yes. So the the lesser prairie chicken,
Much more fancy than a regular chicken.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Was moved that would be placed on the endangered species list. And I think there's some importance to placing things on endangered species lists.
Sure.
But this feels so much like federal overreach. Where the chicken roams is oil and gas territory. It's I believe a lot of it is in Kansas, it's in Texas, it's in Nebraska, all areas where oil and gas extraction is key, and that's a huge part of the economy. Well, guess what? Their land just happens to be the land where these roam. But something interesting. He is only moving to put the section of these chicken that roam on certain area of land where they get oil and gas out. That's where he's trying to protect them at, not in the other area where they roam. So it's only the area where there's
Really?
oil and gas.
Yes.
Yeah. So the area where
Wow.
they don't roam, or where they do roam, but there's not oil and gas, he doesn't care
doesn't
about
care about
protecting
them
them there.
there. Yeah.
But their population is declining there, but he's only wants them endangered in the area where there's oil and gas extraction. So it feels like
He's not even trying to hide it anymore.
so it feels like Joe Biden is trying to exploit the Endangered Species Act to push for his radical environmental agenda. Do you guys feel like that's what's happening here?
Well, I mean, my favorite game is dumb or dishonest.
Oh, yes,
when
I
it
love
comes
this
to,
one.
to Democrats. So does Joe Biden not actually understand the consequences of what he's doing, or is he misusing the Endangered Species Act to favor his own ideology? Well, that's a toughie. I wouldn't put either past him. Although Joe Biden is much, much smarter man than his public persona gives off. He kind of cultivates that, just old Uncle Joe kind of thing. But you don't get to be president by being dumb. You just don't. You can be uninformed, but you can't be dumb. So I'm going to go with dishonest on this. I'm going to say that Joe Biden is he cares more about really what it comes down to, I think, is he cares more about globalism than anything else. And one of the ways that he fosters globalism is to make America energy dependent on other countries and to disadvantage the American worker, including oil and gas workers, who are mostly unionized and, supported him in his run for office. So this is a complete betrayal by him of them. But I would say that's how I'd bet. Mm-hmm. That's how I'd bet.
Yeah.
Right.
Dumb.
Dumb.
It's just the continuity errors hurt. Like when we see he's helping Germany and Russia, I believe, was that with the EU construct a pipeline. So I mean, there's the continuity errors, and that's frustrating because as American voters, I feel like we should be able to look at that and say, like, well, what's going on here, Mr.
Right.
Joe? Like, how stupid are we really?
Yeah.
And then
He thinks we're pretty stupid.
yeah, and when you get the, I think all of us here, I don't want to speak for all of us, if there was a chicken that was going to go extinct because of a certain move, I feel like all of us would be like, well, we don't want animals to go extinct. We're not bloodthirsty. We don't want to kill all the chickens and sell them to KFC. We're not crazy
Right.
people.
I'm not even sure KFC serves chicken. I'm not sure what that
That
is.
was a bad endorsement.
Actually, maybe that might have been a KFC chicken.
That might
we
have
saw
been.
That might have
earlier.
been. That might have
I'm not
been.
sure
Yes.
how that works.
So it's frustrating to see the office of the president exploit an animal to pursue their ideological or their ideological beliefs, I guess. The continuity error strikes. That's so frustrating to see this, and then the Keystone pipeline. In addition to that, it's a war on sufficiently safe energy. And what is your substitute, Mr. Biden?
Yeah.
What are you going to tell these
Yeah.
people whose lives are now at least not? I don't want to say ruined. I'll give them some resilience. I'm going to give.
Sure, of course. Over time, anyway.
But it's just at the flick of a pen. It's just really that's the part that's just getting over a bird. There should be much more inquiry over this. Just like, and I think you pointed this out. There are 4 regions specifically where this bird roams.
Yeah.
And only 2 of them are just the population has decreased all throughout them. So it's just like, why are we? It's just so politically motivated. It's so shallow.
Yeah.
We all love birds. We all love animals, but Mr. Biden, well, there's people at stake. There's lives at stake. Children. I don't know.
That's just disingenuous.
I think, George, you hit on a great point about this being fundamentally having something to do with globalism. Biden has signed the United States back into joining the Paris Climate Accord, and part of that is reducing our carbon emissions by 2030, I think. And so, Biden is being really sneaky by making it seem like he's protecting an animal, when in reality, it's all part of the globalist agenda to, like you said, make us less energy independent. And are we going to produce less emissions? Yeah, because we're going to be energy dependent.
We'll be walking.
Yeah, we're not going to be producing anything. We're going to be relying on China and on other countries and this new Russian pipeline, probably.
Yeah.
So
it really just relocates the carbon emissions. It doesn't eliminate them.
And so another thing that I thought was really interesting about all this is the energy producers here and the farmers and the ranchers that use this land have actually voluntarily made conservation efforts for this bird. And in those areas where they've made those efforts, the population has increased. So these people, without the federal government forcing them to, have chosen to protect this bird while also conducting their activities. I always think that's the best way to. This idea that land can be only used for one purpose is crazy. You should be able to farm land, to ranch land, to extract energy from land while also allowing animals to roam on it, to allow people to recreate on that land. And the people in these states have demonstrated that that is possible. And so, this begs the question, and I think I know the answer to this, should this really be the federal government's role, or should it be left up to local control to manage these types of situations on how land should be used?
Likewise.
Yeah.
We're on the same page. We don't even need to say anything. No.
Always local. Always better.
I mean,
local.
it's just it's so nice when you get to see voluntary action happen and not be coerced, and have your opportunity to make a decision over your life, something that impacts you and the people around you, to just be taken. It's so, and usually 9 times out of 10, I think we could discuss at length about this voluntarily decision. Much like what I think we would have saw with COVID, a lot of people would have voluntarily done the mitigation efforts themselves. When given a choice, people do stuff that is good. Giving people a choice is key.
That's exactly right. I said from the beginning of COVID, if we were dealing with the bubonic plague, we'd all be sheltered in place. We would all be in our homes. Our doors would be locked. No one would have to tell us to do anything because we don't want bubonic plague.
Yes.
The fact that COVID just, and yes, I know it was a tragedy in many lives. I'm not trying to make light of that. I'd lost a friend to COVID. But the fact that it was in almost every case a very mild disease of, the flu.
Yeah.
That's why people didn't do it, because they didn't see the need. The risk didn't outweigh the benefit. So it's the same thing. We live in an area here in northern Phoenix that's just got all kinds of wildlife. 25 years ago, this was desert where we are, and now there are 30,000 people living here, and it was intentionally built with a lot of washes in between housing divisions and that kind of thing. There's javelina out here. There's foxes and skunks and raccoons and quadamundi and roadrunners and coyotes and bobcats, and I've had most of those things in my backyard.
There was a bear the other day.
There was
too,
a
wasn't
bear
there?
the other day, yeah. So that, I mean, it was very intentionally built to allow space for that. And the fact is that everyone who lives here loves that those things are all here.
Yeah.
The coyote will run by my office window once in a while, and I'll yell coyote, and 14 people come in my office and look out the window to see the coyote. It's just really cool. So if somebody came up to us and said, hey, you know what, if we build that water tower you're thinking about building, it's going to demolish the bobcat population in the area. They could, they're not going to be able to survive that. We would take that seriously.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to tell us. There'd be no regulation needed. We just need the information, because if you live in an area that has wildlife in it, for the most part, you value that wildlife. In fact, it may be part of why you live in that area. Meanwhile, some bureaucrat in D.C. who's probably never been to Kansas, probably mocks it when he flies over it on his way to L.A., thinks he knows what's best for the people on the ground there. And so, local. It's always better local. Federal is always terrible. There are very few things the federal government needs to be in charge of. There are a few, but they're very few. And even those things that they should be in charge of, they do poorly. Almost universally, they do them poorly. There's no better alternative, but they do them poorly. And one of those things, of course, Brett, is the military defending the country.
Foreign policy. I don't know how our foreign policy. That's a great thought experiment to see how our foreign policy would be conducted if it was just conducted by all the 50 states.
Yeah, well,
obviously.
the president. It's one of the few things the president is given specific authority to do.
Yes.
Is conduct foreign policy, and we remember that on Memorial Day. I mean, that's a day on which lots of people don't. They think of it as Veterans Day, or they think of it as July 4th or whatever. They don't really realize that Memorial Day is for fallen soldiers. But we remember that.
Yeah, so we have here there could be a number of conflicts about which I will address, but this one specifically will be about Yemen. So the Yemen conflict is interesting for the United States specifically because we have never really been on the ground and fought the group which the Saudi Arabians are fighting. We have put soldiers on the ground to fight Al-Qaeda, but like you guys probably know, within that region, Yemen, Afghanistan, obviously not located right next to each other, but in certain communities or in certain regions, there's more than one group or terrorist organization operating.
Sure.
So in this instant, the main conflict in Yemen is it's a proxy conflict. It's between the Iranians and the Saudi Arabians. The Iranians and the Saudi Arabians. And it started in 2014 after Houthi rebels. So the Houthis are backed by Iran. They took over the government. Peace deals faltered. They couldn't. No one could reach a peace deal. And the government before the revolution was forced to leave, and they went to Saudi Arabia. And then after that, the Saudi started conducting an air war and a campaign to isolate Yemen on the coast, backed by a number of Gulf states, us, Germany, France, and Great Britain. Mostly just versus this this Houthi Iranian-backed militia group in Yemen. And this war has been going on for roughly 6 years. We're not fighting, which is good. Nonetheless, I would just like to read you guys off some numbers about the civilian aspect of this conflict. 22 million people within Yemen have been displaced or moved. There are over 100,000 casualties, specifically civilian. There are 8 million right now facing famine, and 1 million are being affected by a cholera outbreak. Most of our aid humanitarian aid doesn't reach the people because of the Saudi-led blockade. So this is a very horrible circumstance. And it's one of those places, I don't know how we all feel about the last 20 years of involvement in the Middle East. Under Trump, there happened to be a change in rhetoric, and that change in rhetoric was mostly like, what are we going to do? What are our troops going to do? There was, in my mind, there was a shift in how we looked at the military, and some that said, well, maybe we shouldn't send our sons and daughters there in the first place. and that cohort of people started to gain traction. Our involvement in Yemen has mostly been through munitions, aid, like missiles, guns, tanks, F-15s, stuff like that. And for me, this hits something special because I just don't like it. I don't like this. I don't like seeing our involvement in such a horrific conflict. In addition to that, we could talk about Afghanistan, we could talk about Iraq, we could talk about Syria,
Sure.
we could talk about Libya, we could talk about a whole litany of conflicts which we've been involved. So it's like, what after 4 years of Trump and after 4 years of Biden in 2024, where do you guys think the U.S. will still be in the Middle East? In addition to that, are conflicts like this worth our time? Are we willing to trade San Francisco for Islamabad? Or
San
that's in
Francisco,
Pakistan.
maybe.
That's in
Yeah, maybe
Pakistan.
San Francisco.
I might trade San Francisco.
That's where
It's
Pelosi
just,
is, isn't she?
It's just one of those. Yeah, San Francisco is probably a bad choice.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's asking our great grandparents and giving them the same scenario. I think that they would be completely just jaw dropped. Their jaws would be dropped at the what I'm describing is to them. Why are we here? Like in their minds. But I mean, pre World War II, we were most
Well, I
of our
don't know.
society.
Teddy Roosevelt threw the
That's true. That's very
Marines
true.
into Central America fairly often.
That's
to,
true.
Yeah.
to save the banana industry, basically. So it's not a brand new situation. I think it's difficult because of a couple of things. One, the changing nature of warfare is one of them. So, we often talk about foreign wars. We're talking about American involvement in foreign wars. And I don't know that since maybe Vietnam that phrase means much anymore. Foreign wars implies that all of the action, all of the involvement is whatever is outside of our shores. That's not what radical Islam looks like anymore. Regardless of how you feel about Iraq and Afghanistan, there's one thing that both of those endeavors did very well. It kept almost all terrorists fighting the American military instead of coming to the United States and fighting American civilians, which is prior to 9/11, what they did. And of course, on 9/11, that's all they did. Since then, rightly or wrongly, the United States military and foreign policy has essentially given radical Islam another target. So you want to fight somebody, fine, you fight us. We'll make it easy for you. We're right here in Iraq. We're here in Afghanistan, whatever. Now, you can argue whether that's a good strategy or not. It has been a successful strategy in terms of that goal of getting the target moved.
Okay.
Whether that's what you want to do or not, again, I think that's totally up for debate. The other thing has changed some here recently. One of the bigger changes between the Trump administration and the Biden administration is the U.S. attitude towards Israel. So the question as to whether American foreign policy is going to center on the Middle East. I think the answer to that is yes, and the reason that I think that, and I've got some bias here that's going to come out, but the reason I think that is because I think world history focuses on the Middle East. I think it's centered on the Middle East. I think 3,500 years ago, God chose for himself a people, pulled them out of Egypt, and said, "I'm going to be your God, and you're going to be my people." And literally, I'm paraphrasing. Plus, I think he spoke in Hebrew, not English. But that's pretty much what he said. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Fast forward to Revelation chapter 20. We're at the very end of the Bible. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know I was going to preach today, but apparently I'm preaching today. God wins, right? That's how Revelation ends. God wins. Satan and death are thrown into the lake of fire. And if I were God, let's all take a minute to be grateful I'm not. My next words would probably be something like, "I told you so, you idiot." What were you trying to do, Satan? I'm God, for crying out loud. What are you trying to do? That's not what God says. You know what God says? He says, now you will be my people and I will be your God. It's the theme of Scripture throughout, from the time that Abraham was called in Genesis to the Exodus in the book of Exodus, all the way through Genesis to Revelation, or Genesis to Revelation from your point of view. So I think the focus is going to be on the Middle East until Jesus returns, because I think that's where God's focus is. So now there are you can come up with lots of secular responses to that question, but I don't believe them. We can talk about how important China is. It is. China is really important. Russia, as far as military threat, of course, is huge. China economic threat, and I guess military threat. North Korea, the so-called axis of evil from military or terrorist even point of view. But in terms of what's going to be the focus of American foreign policy, that's what I think it's going to be. Sorry, I didn't leave you anywhere to go with that now, Joe.
I think that
the Bible says it, Joey.
Right?
So.
Yeah. How do I argue with that? I think that Trump did a great job destroying ISIS, and that's not really something that we have to worry about anymore. And so I do think that the American military it has such an important role, and we need to protect the people that serve this country. And we need to make sure that when we send them places, we are taking a very calculated, and we need to make sure that we know we are doing things for a reason, not just sending people willy-nilly or on a whim or just to be involved in another country. I think that it's not a black and white situation. There's people on the right who have said, under no circumstances can we send military overseas. Sure. We need to make sure that they're all here and we never send them overseas. And I don't think that that's entirely right. I mean, I don't want to just deploy people whenever, but I also do think that there are probably situations where deployment is needed, and like the destruction of ISIS under Trump was a really good thing. And then once that mission's complete, bringing people home is so important. Biden has said he's going to bring the rest of the troops home from Afghanistan. We'll see if that happens. But at the same time, he's been deploying troops since he's been president.
Increasing airstrikes.
And increasing airstrikes. And I think you had a good point.
And that's
about
who he is. That is who Joe Biden is.
Yeah. So
he's going to do that.
I don't think under Biden we'll see the ending of foreign involvement.
No,
I don't think under any president.
It's going to get worse.
I don't think under any president we'll see the end of foreign or American involvement in foreign countries with our military. I just don't think that we will ever see a day where that occurs. And that's whether we're there for the right or the wrong reasons. But I don't see it ending. And like I said, I think it'll increase under Biden.
Is there?
That's who he is.
Is it what's the trap called? The Thudices? It's the trap where you get involved into either way you go, you're trapped and you're going to lose.
I don't know. It sounds like you're saying Thucydides.
Yes.
Who was a Greek historian, but I don't know the traps.
Dang it. I don't want to be completely wrong, so I just don't want to guess. Essentially, I do disagree with both of you on this specifically. But I do agree, obviously, it's been a very successful 20 years. Like, we're safe.
Well, that's right. That's the question.
That's fair.
But is it worth it?
Totally fair.
Right.
Is that the right thing to do?
In my mind, it's just a complete and flat out no.
Sure.
So I like that
opinion.
difference. I like that difference, how you separated that big time. In my mind, we lose. If we continue on this treadmill or on this pathway, we're done. As a sign, if we're to advance the cause of human liberty and human equality and the things on which this country was founded, I just don't think an overextension of our foreign policy. It just we leave what we are here for, and that's for me and you, for our communities. I can't see. This is just a completely separate point, but it's dawned on me as you were saying something. How beneficial it would be if us three could see where our tax dollars were actually spent. And a lot of times, I heard some podcast over the weekend. They said, well, in Switzerland, these people can spend, let's say, $10 on their taxes. Obviously, this is a complete reduction. They spend $10 in their taxes, and they can see where that $10 is spent because they don't have such a. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's
No.
just us. We have
Congress
no
doesn't want you to
idea.
see
No.
any of
Exactly.
No way.
that. They
And a
don't
part of-
want you
yeah.
to see any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Joey, I think you're right. Regardless of what we think is good or bad or indifferent, particularly under Joe Biden, to your point, Brett, this is not going to end anytime soon.
No.
We're going to see people involved in foreign wars, so-called foreign wars. I guess we're stuck with that term, for the foreseeable future. And that means Memorial Days like this one just become more and more impactful every year as more people get added to that list of casualties, men and women who have given their lives for this country, for our freedom. We're grateful for those folks. We're grateful for everybody who serves. But sadly, a lot of Americans know Memorial Day only as a day for furniture sales. That is not who we are. I know that's not who you are as a Western Journal reader, a WJ Live viewer. I know you know the truth, that we honor these men and women, hopefully every day, but certainly especially on Memorial Day. And as I said earlier, I say that as a veteran myself, that we honor these men and women. But having said that, we at the Western Journal are also involved in a fight of our own against fake news. And right now you can join us. We don't sell furniture, but we do have a sale going on. So you can join our fight to get the truth to the American people, and it's even cheaper right now to do it than it normally is. It's easy to find details. Go to westernjournal.com/join, westernjournal.com/join. Easy enough to remember. Oh, look, it's right there on our screen. All of the details there. There are a couple of different plans that you can look into. I won't give you all those details now. I will say that you don't want to miss this Memorial Day sale. I actually don't know when we're ending it. I probably should have asked somebody that question. I know it's still good today, so just go ahead and take care of it today, and you don't have to worry about when we're ending the sale. I'm sure it's
Brilliant
sometime.
marketing technique.
Thanks. Yeah, I wish I'd thought of that purposefully. Look, the fact is we need you in this fight. We need you in this fight, and it has never been easier to join us. So westernjournal.com/join. Go look at your options there, and I know we're going to win. So with your help, we will. And with that, we must say farewell. We always say farewell around here because we're very fancy. We don't say goodbye like those other YouTube shows. There's no value there. We say farewell. Last week, we actually said adieu once. So, I mean, this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And we'll see you again next time on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Thanks for being here this time. Stay safe.
Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no, you and Joe.
The Libertarian?
Yeah, Libertarian Joe.
He's not back.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Come here to go to the studio.
Oh.
No!